It's Waxing Lyrical, baby.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical, Mainz and Dutts. I'm your host, Mainz, and my colleague in a danger zone in Rainford. It's Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
Very glad you could squeeze me in to your very busy, hectic hosting schedule.
One hosting gig on Tuesday for the touchdown review. Really good, actually. Got to speak to some really cool characters from the touchdown.co.uk. Talking all sorts of things. We talked Sam Donald. We talked USC. We talked, would you propose to your girlfriend after your team had lost to an unranked Jacksonville State? I got to kind of help an Atlanta Falcons fan through his kind of emotional turmoil of the week before. Got to speak to a Browns fan living in West Texas who also supports Manchester City. Weird. But anyway, I would highly recommend going to give it a listen. It's the touchdown review on the Touchdown podcast feed. Really good. I'm not saying that because I did it. Yourself? Yeah, if I did, host, edit and producer. Neil, week 2 is upon us, literally really upon us. It's actually started. Breaking news for those who are unaware, and Daniel Jones won't be on anybody's fantasy team, but he will eventually play Washington again. I would suggest you get him on your fantasy team. That's my fantasy insight for this week. But guess what? Eat that loss. Giants fans, eat it. Hope it tastes good. But we're not talking about that. We're going to talk back to plug into the mains. We're going to talk overreaction corner, because I think that's what every single podcast on the planet, NFL podcast on the planet, does in week 1. Well, then Neil's going to give us another 3 fantasy darlings, and we'll also review his ones from last week. Fantasy loser, same, and then me and Neil will finish it off with our fantasy predictions of the week, which will hopefully be a lot better than last week's. Neil,
couldn't really be worse.
It couldn't be worse. No, couldn't be worse. We literally broke someone's career. But on that note, let's start and let's plug into the mains. As we said, Dutton, it's overreaction week in the NFL, and the question is trying to find out what you should overreact about and what you shouldn't. So what I've got is a number of questions with a number of multiple choice answers, and I'm interested to find out what you think in relation to each one. So let's get it started. First one: which team should we be more concerned by? The Green Bay Packers, the Buffalo Bills, or the Minnesota Vikings?
See, I would throw the hidden option D in, the Baltimore Ravens, but obviously of those 3, I would say the Vikings, because their offense looked putrid. Their defense, the Mike Zimmer can't have a bad defense 2 years in a row narrative is dying a very, very quick death. Yet again, the Vikings are going to make me look stupid. And yeah, they didn't get anything going. The statistic you told me regarding their third down average yards to gain is terrifying.
So the average yards to gain is how many on all your drives on third, when you got to third down, what was the average that you had left to go to get to first down? For example, the San Diego Chargers was 5.7. It was like 5th best. The Los Angeles Chargers. They'll still always be San Diego. The Minnesota Vikings average distance on third down was 12 yards to go to first down. But you start at 10, so that means you've gone backwards twice. It highlights a lot of penalties by the Minnesota Vikings and really bad play.
The problem that I noticed is that, and we all know, you more than most, that at the end of the season we're going to look back at Kirk Cousins' numbers and say, oh, another solid season. This is why statistics don't tell everything, because if you watch, he did not play well. He didn't have the oh shit moments, that we know that there's always a what the hell did you just throw that for? But he didn't look good. So if he looks bad, he brings down everyone because he is a facilitator.
Yeah.
He's not a raiser. And I'd say the defense looked bad, and Mike Zimmer got his arse out-coached by Zach Taylor.
That's not good. It's not a good look. That it's not a good look. I'm gonna do partial sky falling in Buffalo. They did play the Pittsburgh Steelers, so the defense would have been really bad. I'm not 100% sure if the other team has TJ Watt. That what I think I should do on offense is spread everybody out as far as possible, all wide, and don't give any support to either of my tackles, because that's how you get quarterbacks killed. Brian Daboll. I think we always thought that there was no way Josh Allen would be as good this year as he was last year. I just don't think that was necessarily feasible. The question is, how close would he be to last year than 2 years ago? And he was far too close to the 2 years ago than for anybody's liking.
It was a worry, and we know about the Bills that they are not going to establish the run, because in the words of Brian Daboll, they just want to score points.
Correct.
And they don't think establishing the run gets them there. That's fine. I applaud it. Brian, before the Eagles appointed future Hall of Fame coach Nick Sirianni, I did want Brian Daboll, partly because of his aggressive attitude. But it helps if, as you say, you're leaving your tackles on an island to take on TJ Watt. It would have helped if why don't you sprinkle in the run?
That's what I'm saying, right?
You're going to sprinkle in the run with Devin Singletary. Yeah, that's a light sprinkling. We're talking about lemon drizzle sprinkling here. We're not throwing at it.
You also went 35-0 down at the time, so you were allowed to run the ball,
Of course, yeah. It was, the game was tight until your special teams did something not special. It's a blip. I mean, the Steelers, it was their blueprint. They're going to have to beat teams on defense because, God almighty, if week one is when you are at your healthiest, I don't want to watch Ben Roethlisberger attempt to throw a pass in November. Oh my God, it was horrible. Absolutely. He averaged 4.5 yards per attempt from a clean pocket. Ben Roethlisberger is 6'6". If he fell forward, he gets 5 yards, surely. My
favourite part about that is that, if someone said to someone before that game, the new offensive coordinator is Matt Cavanagh, what is Matt Cavanagh known for? It's for shifts and movements before the snap. Not on a Big Ben offense, it's not, as everybody was completely static.
Put it this way, he shifted and moved like that tanker in the Panama Canal.
Yeah, exactly.
With about as much wiggle.
Exactly.
It was horrible. If they get into a situation where the defense doesn't get home and Ben Roethlisberger has to win the game for them, they are so screwed.
They are. Neil, which fantasy player should we be most concerned by? Calvin Ridley, Derrick Henry, or Saquon Barkley?
They all have their own concerns. Saquon Barkley doesn't look good. I mean, as we say, we're speaking after Thursday Night Football.
Yeah, we've seen him play twice now.
Yeah, the second series he opens up with a 41-yard run. His remaining 12 carries for the rest of the game got him about 12 yards.
Can I just say the elephant in the room here? Is that
Jason Garrett?
Well, no, that's not an elephant in the room. That's everyone knows that. That's what Saquon Barkley's whole career has been like. He consistently has splash plays and then has 15 carries for 4 yards.
Now, someone pointed out that Saquon Barkley's numbers, when Eli Manning isn't his quarterback, are below the top tier. And we saw a prime example of that last night where Daniel Jones is running the ball himself. Well, if the quarterback is running himself, he's not throwing check down passes to his running back.
Yeah.
And the running back isn't getting carries either. So Daniel Jones, from a fantasy point of view, he's going to improve. His stock is going to rise because rushing quarterbacks do. This is what happens. But it's going to hurt Saquon Barkley. Calvin Ridley, I'm not going to say a buzzsaw, but he walked into a situation where the Eagles were almost inviting the Falcons to run on them, knowing that once it got into the red zone, they'd constrict and say, you're not getting past us now. And then it got to a situation where, okay, the Falcons, you now need to pass the ball, and they couldn't. I don't think that'll happen all the time, but the Falcons just looked absolute dog shit. The first two drives, yeah, they're good. You've got to the goal line virtually, and you've settled for 3. That was it. They weren't bold, they weren't imaginative. Whereas Derrick Henry ran into the situation that many of us have feared, is that their defense was trash. Their offensive line wasn't very good, so they couldn't lean on Derrick Henry. The game got out of hand, and he got game scripted out of it. That could happen more often this season than people like to admit. And the biggest knock we've always had on Derrick Henry, 2,000 yards last year, 17 touchdowns, didn't finish as the running back one because he doesn't catch passes.
Yeah.
So I would be more concerned still with Saquon Barkley because I still don't think he looks fit. I just don't trust that offense at all. It looked awful. Yeah, it moved the ball a bit, but lo and behold, who's their offensive MVP last night? Graham Gano, 5 field goals. Gee, thanks. That's great. And they just look dog shit. I'm terribly sorry. They couldn't open wide running lanes. Barkley doesn't look like he can create them by himself. He's a problem.
Yeah. I'm going to go Henry here because I'd said that he wouldn't be last week. There was an issue that he could not be a very good rusher because of the situation that you've said, right? They haven't addressed the other weaknesses in the team that allow him to be an excellent running back. And as you quite rightly point out, he doesn't catch passes, right? Like, if they're rubbish this year, that's Derrick Henry is not going to score you many fancy points, and that's an issue. And if the defence is bad, they're just going to have to throw it to Julio Jones and AJ Brown. Although, and I think this is right, I'm not sure who the new offensive coordinator is in Tennessee. So
Todd Downing.
So Todd, you've got Julio Jones and AJ Brown, and my understanding is after a half you targeted them a combined 3 times. Go to hell. Like, seriously, go away.
Mainz, you know as well as I do that you can only keep a playmaker like Chester Rogers under wraps for so long. You have to give him the ball.
Which great performance is going to last multiple weeks in this season, almost to the end? Will it be Kyler Murray? Will it be the returning Gronk? Or will it be the Houston Texans?
Oh, God. Hey, Urban, it's college football. They want you back. We'll wait. They were awful.
They were awful. Gronk
looked great, but I think the Buccaneers would prefer him to go back to what they actually brought him back for. That is to block and catch occasionally. I don't think they want to be feeding him 9 targets a game. So I think we're going to see OJ Howard sprinkled in a lot more. Kyler Murray, if people can remember, a lot's happened since last season. After 10 weeks of the season last year, he was on pace for the greatest fantasy season of all time. Then he got hurt, and again, the shoulder injury, it stopped him running and it affected his passing. We've seen he can put on shows like he did on Sunday. Obviously, Sunday was a perfect storm. Everything came together. But the type of playmaker he is, and the type of offense they have, and the weapons they have inside the goal line, down in the shadow of the end zone, their best play is still zone reading with Kyler Murray. So he's going to have the rushing upside he wants. He's a touchdown threat, and he's got pretty good weapons, even if they refuse to acknowledge that AJ Green is dust.
He is. And final one, Neil, of the elite, I guess the top 10 to 12 players, which one's winning in my fancy league? CMC, Tyreek Hill, or Joe Mixon?
Well, CMC finishes the RB1 and didn't score a touchdown.
CMC is outrageous.
It was the most unheralded 180 yards from scrimmage I've ever seen in my life. Tyreek Hill was having, it seemed, a quiet day, and then in a blink of an eye, 75 yards later, he's flipped that game on its script, and he's flipped fantasy lineups. Now, if you were, clever, bold, insightful enough to listen to people who said you should be looking to pair, I'm not saying stack, because stack is more than one player, pair your quarterback with his most potent weapon, then fantasy-wise, you did very well in week 1 if your quarterback was Patrick Mahomes and that weapon was Tyreek Hill. I speak for someone who looks a bit like me, sounds a bit like me, and lives in my house. So we know Tyreek Hill has that game-flipping, power. Joe Mixon, if that's the workload he's going to get, every running back touch, the receiving work, he's going to get the goal line work, that's fantastic, because where you took Joe Mixon, he's going to be an absolute bargain. But who do we want to bank on the most? I'll bank on the fellow who's still tethered to Patrick Mahomes, thank you.
Yeah, it's tough to argue with the situation where you have a lot of fantasy players, it seems like, where for them to get 20 points, 6 plays need to have happened, whereas it seems that for Tyreek Hill it needs to be 2, and that's always useful, right? Because you don't necessarily need 10 targets for him to have a load of thing. You need 3 and him to catch 2, and 2 of them go for touchdowns. So yeah, absolutely. That's it on Plugged Into the Mains. Let's move on to Fantasy Darling.
Hello, darling.
Neil, let's quickly recap last week. I believe, because I'm nice, you were 2-1 on Fantasy Darlings. So you picked 3. You picked Raheem Mostert. We won't talk about that. Total fail.
He was averaging 10 yards a carry when he got hurt.
And will stay averaging that for the rest of the season as he no longer plays NFL in 2021. You then had T. Higgins, 4 catches, 58 yards and a score. I think you could argue that's a win for someone where you'd pick T. Higgins from and a wide receiver 2/3, I guess. And then you had Sam Darnold, 24 of 35 for 279 and a touchdown and a rushing score, which is always nice. So you could argue 2-1.
Yeah, it wasn't the worst shout. I'd say the Mostert one it's a gut punch, especially for someone like him who he's dealt with a lot of injuries. And worryingly, it looks like San Francisco are going down that road again where they appear to be snake bitten, and an awful lot of players are getting hurt. Not quite Mostert, because as we know, the Shanahan system plugs in 6th round running backs and churns them out.
Yeah.
But they're losing cornerbacks, they're losing linebackers and safeties. We've done this, San Francisco. We saw it last year. It didn't end great. It starts with a defensive player and it escalates. With T. Higgins, he benefited from the fact that he has an effective link-up with Joe Burrow. I think it was quite clear that he's going to be second fiddle behind Jamar Chase. But as they ramp up Joe Burrow's fitness and return to confidence in his leg, they're going to get more and more pass happy, so they're both going to eat. And Sam Darnold was one of those players that, as I say, he was free from Gase. It was the revenge game. If I had to pick Sam Darnold again for the rest of the season, I would consider myself in deep shit.
Yeah.
But I got it out of the way.
Correct. Okay, Neil, who are the 3 this week?
Well, the first one this week, it's tethered to Kyler Murray. It's Christian Kirk. He was hyper efficient last week. He caught all 5 of his targets, scored 2 touchdowns. I'm sure we know that's sustainable. But they are playing the Minnesota Vikings, and their secondary did not look good, especially to secondary receivers. So I think, as someone who, I think it was Joe Dolan, pointed out that if Christian Kirk doesn't score a touchdown in his games, then from a fantasy point of view, he is not borderline usable. He is, my God, why did you pick him? But I like the fact that he probably does have touchdown upside, because on the offense he's in the slot. The Viking slot receivers aren't great. He's quicker than them. So I think he's someone who can come in and can chip in. I may have made the statement that growing up, watching the television programs that I did, I always knew you could count on Captain Kirk, whereas I always know you can never 100% count on Christian Kirk, because I've been drafting him since he came into the sodding NFL, and I have suffered because of it. But I like him this week. It'll be nice to see if he can start stringing these games together after he had the game he had last week.
Next, Neil, who's number 2?
The next is Big Mike Williams. Now, the Chargers came out and said they were going to use him in the Michael Thomas role. So by that means he was going to argue and fight with his teammates. He was going to get hurt and rehab on his injury time and just catch slants when he played. But no, we saw that the Chargers, it's a concentrated passing tree. It's Keenan Allen, it's Mike Williams, it's Jared Cook. And they're happy with those 3. Everyone else around them, it's borderline. They're playing the Cowboys. The Cowboys were decimated by injuries beforehand, and they're losing more and more pieces as the weeks progress. They gave up 17 receptions with 250 yards and 2 touchdowns to wide receivers against the Buccaneers. And of those 250 yards, Mike Evans had 24. So we've seen that their secondary options can he? And I think if Mike Williams is going to get as good a target share as Keenan Allen, and it's not going to be relied on, okay, Mike, we're going to throw you this ball. It only counts as a catch if you're diving at full length and you smack your head on the floor. If you actually say, okay, Mike, catch that and run, then maybe we might see some hitherto unseen yak ability from him. But as a wide receiver 3 going into wide receiver 2 territory, I think he's in a great spot this week because the Cowboys defense, it's a sad story, and it really hurts.
Yeah, I am devastated. I'm sure the fans are like, oh, at least we got Tampa Bay out the way. Who have we got this week? Keenan Allen. Oh dear. Never mind. 0-2. Enjoy.
So good, by the way.
Oh, Neil.
It was a clinic.
Neil, I watched every play, every third down that just hit him straight in the hands, and he caught it and did his one, and you're like, oh, he's done it again.
Yeah, like, why do you hurt me when all I do is show you love?
Who's the third one, Neil?
Same match. Jared Cook. Interesting debut. Didn't light up the box score, but I say caught 5 of 8 targets of 56 yards. He saw the 3rd most air yards among all tight ends, behind only Darren Waller and David Njoku. Remember him? He commanded 17% of the team targets. So again, we like that usage in a tight end, especially one tethered to a prolific quarterback. The Cowboys gave up, as we said before, 8 receptions, 90 yards and 2 touchdowns to Gronk. I'm not saying Jared Cook's Gronk. I'm not saying he isn't. I am saying that the Cowboys can't cover anyone, and that this is the type of situation where everyone on the Chargers could get theirs. So after week 1 of the season, if you didn't draft Kittle, Kelsey, Waller, Hawkinson, you're probably looking at your tight end and saying, do something. So maybe, Jared Cook is available in plenty of leagues. Maybe just plug him in and bad things might not happen.
This week, Christine Kirk, Mike Williams, Jared Cook, Neil's fantasy darlings. Let's find out who Neil hates this week with Fancy Loser. So, one massive victory last week, Neil. Victory lap indeed. Mike Gesicki, 0 catches. Big fat goose egg. Boy, were you right there. Who is this week's Fancy Loser?
This week's Fancy Loser is someone who, if volume was everything, I'm sure he'd be a much better fantasy contributor than he actually is, but it isn't. Context has to be applied. Now, Marquise Brown has disappointed fantasy owners in the past because we've painted him as something he's not meant to be. This deep threat, this Tyreek Hill game-flipping option. No. Just no. He's not. He's the type of player you don't draft in the first round of your draft. You just don't. Lincoln Riley. Don't care. You don't do it. The Ravens are... We're only a game in, but they appear to be all packed up. The car is loaded. They've got all the luggage secured for a long trip along a season from hell. As it looks like everything that can go wrong is starting to go wrong. They lost 2 more players to ACL injuries from last week. Ronnie Stanley is injured. That means Andre Villanueva is going to go from right tackle to left tackle. Well, that's good because you couldn't play right tackle any worse than he did against the Raiders. That vaunted pass rush from the Raiders. Jesus wept, man. He made Max Crosby look like Lawrence Taylor. And I don't mean Lawrence Taylor now. I mean in his pomp. So we've got all these problems. The offense is going to, it's going to struggle because Lamar Jackson, he didn't look as comfortable as he usually is. The offense, the pass blocking isn't great. So even if he is going to have to take to the air, Marquise Brown, he's going to have to rely on, get me the ball and I'll do it with Yak. Well, you haven't done that, though. And, they're playing a game against the Chiefs. You'd think, oh, this could shoot out. No, it couldn't. Because the Ravens don't shoot out with the Chiefs. They get shot out by the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill split against the Ravens. I think it's only 3-2 games. Oh my God. Over the course of a season, it would set fantasy records. Now, the Chiefs aren't a big cover team. If you actually look, they don't go over the spread very often. They usually keep things close. But I think the chance to essentially knock out one of the AFC powerhouses in week 2, I think they might keep their foot on the gas a bit more. And that's the reason. Despite that, I just don't think Marquise Brown is going to do a lick of shit in fantasy this week.
The problem is with Marquise Brown, whether he's good or not good, is that he plays for the Baltimore Ravens, and they're not allowed to have good wide receivers, as well, especially drafting them, as they never have. In the terms of knocking them out, I understand what you're saying, but like, I'm not 100% sure. I mean, the Browns are playing the Texans, so they should win 1-1. Steelers are playing the Raiders, which has got like that Steelers Mike Tomlin meltdown alert, like flashing in your face. Do you know what I mean? Meltdown alert. We're gonna win 10 games, but boy, when we drop the duds, they're gonna be epic. So I don't know if they'll drop them out, but yeah, I mean, Hollywood Brown makes perfect sense, right? Or Hollywood Brown, or Bakersfield Brown, or wherever he'd be from. I don't know.
Bakersfield Brown is the best one, I think.
But he's not even. You know that? Do you know that it's not hot?
Yeah,
it's Florida. Okay, I'm going to shoot.
Kevin Clark, I believe.
Well, it's no Bakersfield. Is Hollywood is where he's from, so that wasn't his. Anyway, enough of that nonsense. Let's find out what mine and Neil's fantasy prediction of the week is. So Neil, last week, I said Raheem Mostert would be the top scoring running back in the NFL.
10 yards a carry.
Yeah, but did not do that. Quite the opposite. Almost like not that.
10 yards a carry.
Yeah. You said that Blake Jarwin would be a top 5 tight end. I'm just going to read the top 5 tight ends. Rob Gronkowski, Travis Kelce, TJ Hockenson, Darren Waller, and Juwan Johnson. I don't even really know who Juwan Johnson is. I see that he plays for the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, but have you considered that I didn't say on what galaxy Blake Jarwin would be a top 5 tight end? True.
So Neil, I'm going to let you go first this week. What is your fantasy prediction for week 2?
My fantasy prediction for week 2 is 15 catches, 150 yards and 2 touchdowns for Keenan Allen, earning him the wide receiver 1 for the week.
Just because he's playing Dallas, or just because he's awesome, or both?
Bit of A, bit of B, mostly C, both.
You hate to see them being bad, don't you?
No. You really don't.
You don't, no. You don't. My prediction is in the exact same game. Last week, Dak Prescott and Justin Herbert combined for 43 fantasy points. This week, they will combine for 80 fantasy points. 80, 240s. This is going to be 53-52 nonsense, this. I'm going to love it. On Red Zone.
Oh, Scott might blow an O-ring.
Because my team's already won this week, so, sit back and enjoy Scott's dulcet tones throughout the rest of the show. It's going to be awesome. Neil, before we leave, where can people catch you and read you and listen to you before we're back again next week?
On the Twitter at Nutton13. This week I've had my Super Bowl odds tracker for Numberfire. I've had my tight end report for Rotoviz. My matchup column for the Chargers is on 4for4 Football. I believe, I'm trusting in producer Ollie Thornton's technical pokery jiggery wizardry, that my 3 late game players you need to start will be on the Going Global with Nat on Sunday on TalkSport. And other than that, I'll be on the Twitter mouthing off on Sunday.
Fantastic. I am at Mainzy7. Combine me at Waxing_Lyrical. As Neil said, I stupidly volunteered myself to do the Touchdown podcast, the Touchdown review, which will be with you every week, probably Tuesday evening, Wednesday morning, unless the Mighty Reds are playing in Champions League, when it might change. We will have a cavalcade of guests talking through the articles they've written over the past week, and also reviewing last week's action in the NFL and in college. It was really good to talk to Ollie Hodgkinson, who's a draft guru, about college that I didn't understand. I said to him, Neil, and I quote, what game should I watch if I'm not watching Alabama Florida 8:30 on BT Sport, and I swear down he named 15 games. That is a man who loves college football. He also had the privilege on the College Chaps podcast of speaking to Dabo Sweeney last week. Those guys are putting your guest list to shame. Nearly need to pick up your game.
No, I don't.
That's it for this show. Week 2 is upon us. Me and Neil are expecting many points in the Dallas Los Angeles Chargers game, but let's be honest, go Bolts. And until next week, these top guys are out.